Now, at the start of the program, I showed you a fair slap from both the Prime Minister, Scott Morrison, and the Labor leader, Anthony Albanese, when it came to their apology about sexual harassment, abuse and assaults in Parliament House. All that happened in Parliament today. If you missed the start of the program, always go onto the website or the YouTube channel. You can pick up most of our stuff later on from there if you're not series linking the program. But I want to ask Nationals MP for the Mallee now, Dr Anne Webster, about some of this. She joins us live from Parliament House. Good to talk to you again. And straight up, with these apologies, we've seen what's said, but what does this achieve?
I think the important thing, Chris, great to see you, by the way. I think the important thing is that this is bipartisan and it's across every sector of the House. So it includes media, it includes staff, it includes MPs and senators. And the committee that has now been formed and will be directed will look at how the 28 recommendations are implemented. So, you know, it's a practical and concrete way to move forward. I think it's important.
I think the speeches were more about emotion and commitments and virtue signalling to a degree. Grace Tame herself called them performative. Why do we get so much of that? Why isn't it about practical reforms for the whole nation? Or are we suggesting that Parliament House is somehow worse when it comes to these issues than anywhere else?
Well, I don't think it's worse. I think the Prime Minister said himself that this is about every business, every agency, every organisation, institution across the land. But the point he made was that Parliament House is a model, it should be a model employment environment, and clearly there have been lacks, and now is the opportunity. And it's not just, you know, recent, this is generations of behaviours that are unacceptable. And, you know, the fact that there's no excuse, power is not an excuse for abusive power. So I think, you know, the Prime Minister and the opposition leader putting their best foot forward to say we're in control of this. We are in an election period, let's remember that. And I think the important factor is that we have steps now and a committee that will see it forward over this next 12-month period. Well,
certainly this is an issue where everybody would agree on the desired outcomes. I'm just talking about, I suppose, some of the parliamentary theatrics today. There's another issue kicking around that is dividing people quite strongly, and that is the religious discrimination bill that the government's putting forward. This is like a sex discrimination bill or a race discrimination bill, but for religion. And it's come about because a lot of people demanded it on the Liberal side, on the coalition side, after same-sex marriage was legalised. It's now been approved by a Liberal Party party room meeting this afternoon. They've got some sort of compromise that they're going to agree to there. Have the Nats agreed to back this legislation as well?
I was supposed to be in that party room meeting, but I had chamber duty, so I actually haven't caught up on what happened at that party room meeting, which was an extension from this morning. I think what we need to understand, what people of Australia needs to understand, is that Australia is a signatory to the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights. The agreement that we have is that all of the protected attributes, whether it's race, disability, age, sex, and now religion, should have anti-discrimination law. And religion is the only one that we don't have. This is putting in place something that is a missing gap, literally, in Commonwealth law.
Yeah, can I just interrupt you there? Sorry, Anne, I just want to correct myself. It was indeed, as you suggested, a coalition party room. So the coalition party room, Nats and Libs, have agreed to go forward with this legislation, which should mean, we'll wait and see, but that should mean that there won't be people crossing the floor. But the point here is that there's been overreach under the Sex Discrimination Act and the Race Discrimination Act. And a lot of people on the Conservative side argue that there has been overreach. So you can expect to see some overreach here when it comes to religious discrimination legislation too, because you can't control the Human Rights Commission or the courts and the judges. And have a listen to Ian Thorpe, one of our most esteemed Olympians, who's been in Canberra today opposing this push.
What this is is it becomes state-sanctioned discrimination. To gain rights for one group of people whilst excluding another group of people, for me, is discrimination. And with that, we should consider what this place that we're in, what it actually represents and how it represents each and every one of us.
Yeah, Ian Thorpe there, I think he eloquently expresses the fears that many people would have that a Christian school might be able to exclude a transgender student or a gay family. And that's not the sort of thing we want to see happen, is it?
I'm the chair of the Standing Committee on Human Rights. We've just done a public inquiry into this legislation, and what we found was that there was misinformation out there, misunderstanding about what the legislation means. In point of fact, Christian, Jewish, Muslim, religious schools can expel students of gay or transgender positions now. And that came under Mark Dreyfus, under Labor. There was an exemption put into the SDA, or the Sex Discrimination Act, that actually allows that now. What the Prime Minister has said today is that we will be, that was the latest when I was there this morning, that we would be looking at an amendment to Section 38(3) of the Sex Discrimination Act to remove that exemption. So schools cannot actually expel kids who are gay or lesbian. And I mean, the fact is that religious schools, the information that we have is that religious schools don't expel gay and lesbian kids.
No, in many respects,
they embrace them.
Yes, in many respects, this is legislation to try and fix a problem that doesn't exist as a preemptive, and that's the trouble. When you try and detail all this in legislation, you can lead to some unintended consequences. But it looks like we're going to see a settlement here, a compromise, and well, let's just hope there aren't any unintended consequences, because we will all agree with the desired outcome. Thanks for joining us, Anne. I appreciate it.
Pleasure. Thanks.
That is Anne Webster, who's the Nationals member for Mallee out there in the northwest of Victoria.